American fighter jets were chased by several UFOs over Vietnam, and enemy weapons were mysteriously melted by unknown craft. The military had a choice: tell the truth or bury the most explosive secret during the war. And what you're about to discover will actually shatter everything you thought you knew about the Vietnam War. Because while soldiers were fighting each other, something else was watching from the skies. And this isn't the first time something like this has happened in human history. Why are UFOs watching over battles, wars, and over military conflict zones? Ask yourself this question, because time and time again, they just keep showing up. But today we are specifically focusing on UFO sightings during the Vietnam War. The US military was interested in UFOs because during this time, because they had capabilities far beyond anything that we had. And the rule of war is have technology that outdoes the enemy in order to win. So, of course, you're going to have an interest in these objects that have this type of technology that you can barely even fathom. And you think to yourself, if I had that tech, the war would be over by tomorrow. And they wanted to find out what the technology was and, frankly, who it belonged to, according to a former Air Force intelligence officer, Captain George Filer, who gave an interview to the Huffington Post, who also served in Vietnam with top secret clearance. And while he was there, Filer, according to him, gave daily briefings to General George S. Brown, who was the deputy commander for air operations in Vietnam. And these briefings frequently included reports of UFOs that defied conventional explanation. And frequently during the Viet Cong, or the North Vietnamese, they would be attacking on an outpost. And according to Filer, he mentioned that in the reports that he collected, they would see very strange things in the sky, but very specifically at night. And they tried shooting these things down. Let me just tell you, every single time they failed. Now, how many times, tell me, please, have we heard that? Where military officials around the world have attempted to shoot at UFOs, unknown objects, and 9 out of 10 times they fail. Now, that 1 out of 10 times, they come back injured. That's the scary part. We've seen it in reports from Brazil, Argentina, in Spain, and we're also seeing it in Vietnam as well. And I bet you can also name a few other countries in which we have covered here on this channel where people have attempted to shoot at UFOs, and, well, it didn't really go well for them. Yeah. Well, regardless of this, one area where a lot of UFOs were reported were over the DMZ, also known as the Demilitarized Zone, which is right in between North and South Vietnam during the war. And the pattern of UFO encounters in Vietnam was not random or isolated. Reports consistently describe objects with extraordinary capabilities that surpassed anything in the known military arsenals of that era. Now, you have an aircraft flying along, doing around 500 knots, and then a UFO alongside does some barrel rolls around the aircraft and then disappear 3 times as fast as the fastest US Air Force's fastest jet during the time frame, right? Pretty weird stuff. Now, I'm showing my ears over here to listen to you. How many times have we heard that? The most famous one was during World War II and the Foo Fighters, was it not? Yes, but they said, you guys, you are so silly. You're just chasing Venus. In this case, we didn't get those explanations, which we'll get into a little bit later. We got some other stuff that they tried to explain it away. But now we're going to get into some specifics, and that is some reported accounts. And this first one took place June 15th and June 16th back in 1968, and this is known as the DMZ incident. And it might have to be the most dramatic and well-documented series of UFO encounters that occurred during that night, again between June 15th and June 16th. This incident, often referred to as the DMZ UFO encounter or the DMZ incident, it involved multiple military vessels and aircraft, resulting in casualties and raising questions that persist to this day, even though this encounter took place back in 1968. I mean, there are so many old cases that we're still contemplating here today. But in this one, there was this war between North and South Vietnam, and a patrol boat known as I can pull it up for you, I'll just pull up this one for now, known as the PCF 12, commanded by Lieutenant Pete Snyder, was on a route night patrol. And at around 12:30 a.m., this boat reportedly received a frantic distress call from another patrol boat in the vicinity, claiming that they were being attacked by an unidentified light that they were just calling enemy helicopters. Now, during this communication, they didn't say, "Oh my gosh, guys, it's a UFO. I'm freaking out. What the heck is going on?" Instead, they were going, "Oh my gosh, I'm being attacked by enemy helicopters," which seemed odd because the North Vietnamese enemy were not known to utilize combat helicopters at the time. And what followed was a series of events that would challenge the official narrative of what happened that night. Snyder ordered that boat, the PCF, also known as the Patrol Craft Fast, to head over to the boat that was in distress. And as they were getting close to the other boat, they spotted in the sky two cylindrical bright lights immersed in this very strange glow. And the crew of the boat that was trying to save the other boat in distress watched in horror as the PCF 19 was allegedly destroyed in a flash of light, with only two survivors pulled from the water by the Coast Guard cutter Point Doom. But this encounter was far from over. Even though that took place in June of 1968, so many other things happened. And that PCF 12 continued its patrol up the river and were soon approached by the same two unidentified lights, which took up positions hovering on the port and starboard sides around 300 yards away and about 100 feet above the water. And when the PCF 12 called headquarters for identification of this aircraft, the answer from the beach was no friendly aircraft in the area. Well, that's helpful. Thank you so much for that information, which really meant, yeah, we don't really know what it is. So good luck figuring it out. And realizing that these were not friendly forces, Lieutenant Snyder ordered his crew to open fire. Already sounds bad. Open fire on the mysterious objects. And the crew's description of what they witnessed during this engagement provides some of the most detailed accounts of the UFO encounter during the Vietnam War. Jim Steffs says that he saw one halo in the moonlight and believed it had a rounded front like an observation halo, and it looked like two crewmen sitting side by side. What does that sound like to you? It sounds to me like the Papua New Guinea incident where Father Gill was minding his own business. He goes outside and he sees a dome-shaped craft, well, saucer shape with the dome, and two beings inside. Now, in that other case in Papua New Guinea, Father Gill waved at it and they waved back, and that was a great encounter for the both of them. But this one was not so much, because as I had mentioned, this ball of light, before these officers could see the shape of it, destroyed the other boat. And then the official said, the military was like, you know what, it'd be a really good idea to shoot these down, wouldn't it? And so they did. And they failed. Now, Steffens, the second engineman, describes seeing two beings aboard the UFOs sitting in the observation area. And although they believed the aircraft was firing at them, so the military was shooting at the craft was shooting back at them, he never saw any weapons. And most remarkably, investigations revealed the bullets they fired at the UFOs were the same ones returning to their boat, according to, witness testimony, right? But can we think about that just for a minute? How strange, and also how merciful is that? The question that I posed at the very beginning is, why are UFOs watching over battles and war zones and all these things? We say today, "Oh, we are so ready for UFO disclosure. We are so ready for them to show ourselves, and they can be our space brothers, and it'll be like the best day ever. We'll have cups of tea, we'll laugh and joke." But if they are observing us over the millennia, time and time again, we have proven to ourselves and to them that we are dangerous, that we are violent, and that we are not willing to let go of our internal greed and ignorance and this need to have and be in conflict. Now, in today's world, we have keyboard warriors. 20, 30 years ago, it was more of a fist fight. But regardless, many people have this fight or flight kind of mode. And we are showing that in the history books to our children and to those that are not part of the human civilization, that are observing us for the first time, for the 100th time, or maybe even for the last time. In today, right now, war is taking place. Tomorrow, it'll probably be the same. In 100 years' time, yeah, I can expect that as well. Are we really ready for contact with ET? Aren't we kind of dangerous? Aren't we in some ways a threat? The military says, they are a threat. We must classify the whole issue as a threat. But what if we are the ones that are dangerous? That shouldn't be trusted, right? And in this case, for this encounter, according to the witnesses, these bullets bounced back. Really interesting stuff. And the mystery deepened when an F-4 Phantom fighter jet arrived at the scene at approximately 3:20 a.m. to assist the patrol boats. However, the UFOs quickly left and headed out to the China Sea once more, where they encountered the HMS Hobart, a Royal Australian Navy destroyer, patrolling near Tiger Island. And I have an image of it. Here it is. The HMAS incident is a very unique one as well. And it was reported observing up to 30 unidentified slow-moving lights hovering in the night sky near their ship. And this is kind of where it gets a little controversial, because as the story goes, they exchanged a friendly fire. I mean, I'm really friendly about that, but they try to make it sound nicer than it actually is. And at 3:30 a.m., the Hobart was patrolling, blacked out, and just maintaining radio silence near Tiger Island. And at approximately 20 kilometers off of the Cap Lay, when the boat's radar room detected a fast incoming aircraft, which in this case, they classified it as an IFF, identification of friend of foe system, indicated it was friendly, and the ship was attempting to establish further identity with a Sparrow air-to-air missile struck her in the starboard sidelines. They're trying to communicate with this unknown object in the sky. They think it's just another plane. It's all friendly. And then it shoots a missile at it. Ooh. Now, the attack continued with additional missiles, killing 2 sailors and wounded several others. The official investigation concluded that the HMS had been attacked by mistake by a U.S. Air Force F-4 Phantom that were responding to alleged UFO reports. So both ways is bad. Both ways. Ooh. However, this friendly fire explanation has been questioned by many who were present that night. Also, during the incident, as I had mentioned, 2 sailors didn't make it, and the official reports attribute to error to misidentification, not UFOs. But because we have heard of so many UFO cover ups throughout history, especially during wars, makes you scratch your head and you think, do I really believe that explanation? Is that actually true? Your eyebrows get scrunchy and you say, I don't really know what to believe. However, Jim Steffes concluded, quote, we continue to monitor and track these lights for several weeks after this up until September. I know what the official story is, but this is mine and it's true, and I remember it completely. So he thinks, I don't believe the official story. It was UFOs. It wasn't some misidentification of another US jet. And there's a little bit of confusion. It doesn't really happen. Does it? Yes, but it's incredibly rare. You want to keep as much of your weapons as possible, as much as your men as possible, boats, planes, so on and so forth. To shoot one of your own, it's game over. Like there is no coming back from that. It's pretty devastating stuff. And the significance of these events have not lost of the highest levels of military command. General George S. Brown, who I showed a picture of just a moment ago, but I can pull that up again. There he is. He was intimately familiar with the UFO reports from Vietnam. And during a 1973 press conference, 5 years after the patrol boat UFO encounters, Brown says, quote, I don't know whether this story has ever been told or not. They weren't called UFOs. They were called enemy helicopters. And they were only seen at night, and they were only seen in certain places. They were seen up around the DMZ in the early summer of 1968. And this results in quite a little battle. Now, Brown's acknowledgement that these objects were labeled as enemy helicopters rather than UFOs reveals the military's reluctance to officially recognize the phenomenon for what many witnesses believed it to be. Then it was enemy helicopters. Today, it's mysterious drones. It doesn't change. The labels are changing, but the cover up remains the same. We have to depend on the witness testimony, on the written reports, if there are any and they weren't placed in the archives or burned. We have to take it at face value simultaneously. Who do you believe? Who do you not? And that's where your discernment has to come in, where your BS radar has to come in. You got to figure it out on your own, which is probably the toughest part about this phenomenon, because there's a handful of data. There's a lot of reports, but not necessarily enough for every single person to jump on the bandwagon and say, oh my gosh, yes, the UFO phenomenon is 100% real. We're still having the debate today of, oh no, I don't believe in aliens. Oh no, I've never seen anything. Like the Chilean astronomer about a month or two ago. He did a press conference about the observatories in Chile, some of the best in the world. A journalist asks, okay, well, I mean, aliens? Like, have you seen anything? You're looking at the sky all the time. And this astronomer was so offended. He's like, are you stupid? No, they're not a thing. They can't be traveled. The closest the closest planet to us outside of our solar system is Proxima Centauri. And that's it. And it would take way too long to get there and back with our conventional technology. And he just blew up in front of this poor journalist's face. And we're having that conversation today. We're behind. We really, really are. Let's get into our next case because it just gets more intense as we move along. This one is referred to as the Da Nang F-4 Phantom Chase back in 1968, and the Da Nang is an air base. So what happened here was that four Marines sitting at the end of the runway witnessed a pretty dramatic UFO encounter that involved military aircraft. They were watching two F-4 Phantom jets preparing for takeoff when they spotted two strange lights flying over the base. The F-4 Phantom, described as a flying dump truck, was a massive two-engine fighter bomber that could carry almost 2.5 times the bombs loaded on a B-17 Flying Fortress while flying twice the speed of sound. That's some pretty great stuff when it comes to war, isn't it? As the Marines watched the pair of F-4s take off and climb up into the sky, the strange lights began following the Phantoms, kind of like the Foo Fighters in World War II. Incredibly, the two lights were then joined by 6 more, creating a formation of 8 unidentified objects pursuing the military aircraft. The Marines initially thought the lights might be North Vietnamese planes, missiles, though it would be extremely unlikely since the Communist Air Force never ventured below the DMZ according to reports. And they called the base Air Traffic Control Tower, and they were told there were no unknown blimps on the radar screen, meaning that what these Marines were seeing with their naked eye was not caught on radar, confirming that the F-4s were not being chased by anything. But that doesn't make any sense, does it? And yet, it's a common pattern that we have seen time and time again. The Marines watched as the F-4s, apparently aware of their situation, quickly altered their flight plans and turned back to base. The lights stayed with the Phantoms almost right down to the runway itself, at which that point, the Marines could see the lights, that they were actually oval-shaped objects with multiple beams emitting from them, each beam giving off this kind of amber glow. The objects finally stopped following the F-4s a few hundred feet below landing, hovering for a while, then turned skyward and left the area at high speed. I'd be a little nervous if I saw that. I think any pilot would. It's almost like when you're driving down the road and someone's been following you a little bit too long, you think to yourself, okay, do we just happen to be both going to the same grocery store at the exact same time, or this person is following me and they're a threat? In this case, for the pilots, anything that's following you a little too close is most definitely a threat, unless you're at an air show. And those are awesome if you haven't been to one. Really recommend. But of course, I have more cases for you. So much has happened in Vietnam. So many people have come forward. So many books have been written about these sightings and encounters that, of course, I have more for you. And this one is a pretty disturbing one that took place back in August of 1968. The team had successfully infiltrated North Vietnam, and they found their target and assassinated a high-ranking communist official. And during their withdrawal, they were detected by enemy forces, and a chase ensued as they made their way to a predetermined pickup point for helicopter extraction. With enemy forces still pursuing them by mid-morning, the team found themselves between 2 hills and chose to climb the one to their left for cover. And as they reached cover, they heard the distinctive chattering of AK-47 assault rifles firing from the adjacent hill, with enemy tracers going nearby, firing straight up into the sky. The assassination team initially thought the enemy was firing at their extraction helicopter, but here's a turn for the books. Instead, they saw a large semicircular object appear over the hill next to their position. The object was clearly not an aircraft belonging to either side, And one team member recalled that its color kept changing from light blue to bright red while making absolutely no noise. When enemy tracers got close to the object, it suddenly stopped in midair, just a few hundred feet from the American team's hiding position. And the Americans then witnessed a streak of light shoot out from the front of the object, followed by complete silence as the enemy group just kind of ceased. They went away. They stopped firing at this object. And according to the author, areas, Mac Maloney, I think that's how you say his last name. After the UFO briefly lingered over the enemy position and headed out towards the sea, the team waited 30 minutes before investigating. And what they discovered was a UFO, number one, but there were no enemy bodies, just weapons that had been melted down to almost nothing, leaving a smell so terrible it stayed with the team members for hours. And while their extraction helicopter finally arrived, one team member immediately reported the incident to higher ups and was never seen again by his colleagues. You know what that also kind of sounds like? I love bringing up patterns with you. It sounds a little similar, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. I love to be corrected wrong. It sounds similar to the Vandenberg Air Force Base incident, where Robert Jacobs is filming a UFO during a missile test. By mistake, he didn't actually mean to capture the UFO. He gets called into the office. The men in black show up. They want the footage. And General Mansman, who was Robert Jacobs' higher up, said, look, if they ever torture you or anything, just say it was lasers. But during that time when that video was recorded, lasers weren't a thing just yet. They were still in the baby stages. But if Robert Jacobs had spoken out about it during that time frame, because it took him almost 2 decades before he finally told his story, he could have been silenced as well. And he could have never have been seen again. But he was lucky enough to tell a story nearly decades later. The same thing could have gone for Bob Lazar, where he had this need that if he was going to share the story of Area 51 and reverse engineering technology, he was going to do it in front of the world, in front of the media in order to protect his life, right? As the story goes, at the very least. If you believe him or not, that's a totally different topic. Here, we're looking at the patterns of merely being silenced or not. And in this case, for this particular story, this person spoke up and he was never seen again. The surviving members of the special operations team chose not to mention the UFO incident during their post-mission debriefings, but soon after they were questioned directly about it, not by military personnel, but by civilians using extremely unusual interrogation methods. And if you've ever been in the military or a policeman or a detective of some kind, or even if you just like watch those kinds of TV shows, you kind of know how the interrogation process goes. So when things stand out, you think to yourself, this isn't really matching. This is not how it's supposed to go. And according to one team member, the civilians blindfolded each remaining member of the team, taping their mouths shut as well, and brought them individually to an undisclosed location. Each was placed in a small room with 3 men, one of whom wore a hood to keep his face hidden. What are we doing here? It sounds something out of like Eyes Wide Shut or something like that. It's pretty freaky. And then this hooded person's just sitting in the corner and like listening in. Maybe it was an alien. That'd be pretty cool and freaky simultaneously. But the most disturbing aspect was what happened after the questioning. Each team member recalled seeing a bright flash of light, and the next thing they knew, they were back at their base, like in the Men in Black, where they have the pen and they go like, okay, forget everything, and like this little flash of light comes on, and the person forgets. What if that tech is real? Wow. That would be very dangerous for the general public to have, but very useful for these kinds of people. When the team members tried to discuss what had happened with his colleagues, none of them had any memory of either the interrogation or the UFO encounter that took place with it. Only he retained any recollection of the events, and fearing for his own safety, he decided to keep the story to himself. Years later, after leaving the army and moving to Alaska with his wife, the team member, name unknown, had another encounter while fishing from their boat with the exact same UFO appeared hovering above them, remaining for a few minutes before disappearing permanently. Something that we've seen a lot is when a person has a UFO sighting, there are usually many that follow it. And there are a lot of theories as to why that might be. And I'll let you fill in the blanks on why you think that is. I also want to hear it in the live chat and in the comments as to why a person that has their first UFO encounter, it just leads to so many more. I got more for you. I still got more because we're knee deep in this information now, and there's no turning back from it. I got another one. This one took place January 6th, 1969, and it was in one of the daily journals of the 23rd Infantry Division, the Chule Defense Command, recorded a very strange entry. The command's mission was to coordinate ground defense of the Chule defense sector on the Vietnamese coast around 40 miles southeast of Da Nang. And soldiers manned observation towers around the base, reported an egg-shaped object floating slowly to the ground, glowing with this internal light. The object was observed by multiple witnesses from different positions, making misidentification or shared hallucination unlikely. And the Chule incident is particularly significant because during the Vietnam War, American Army commands maintained daily journals documenting assorted events, and their sites were recorded in official military records in real time, not reconstructed from memory years later. So, tracer rounds and flares both create illumination, but tracer rounds don't float to the ground and certainly aren't shaped like an egg. These egg shaped objects really hit the news recently with Jake Barber's interview with News Nation. And after doing some research, egg-shaped craft have been reported time and time again over the decades, probably jump it back by a century or so. Now that they're not as popular or common as orb-shaped or saucer-shaped, but egg-shaped, we've seen them on an international scale. I did a whole show on egg-shaped UFOs. This one was not added to that category, and it should have been, because this is a very interesting case. And the fact that this incident was documented in official records, and then the best part, actually the worst part, that was sarcasm. The records mysteriously disappeared. They just went missing. So all we have is witness testimony from this. Well, I got something for you. And that is when Edward Ruppelt was the director of Project Grudge, right before it changed to Project Blue Book, he jumped in on some meetings that were held by the Air Force and the Pentagon when they received UFO reports, and the meetings were with a tape recorder, and they were recorded as the meeting went along. According to Edward Ruppelt, decades after the incident, he wrote in his own book stating sometimes these paper reports and the audio recording were burned. Bye-bye, never to be seen again. Is it surprising? No. Is it devastating? Yes, absolutely. So to hear these records to just seemingly, where did it go? Oh, I don't know. It's not surprising, but it really doesn't help our case with following the story, right? Following the witness testimony, does it? No, but we've heard it too many times that you can only turn a blind eye so many times before you're like, hold up, no, now this is getting really fishy. And in this case, it was. It really, really was. And during this time frame, during World War II and during the Vietnam War, it was always being brushed off as, oh, these UFO encounters, Venus. Oh, no, no, it was just the enemy. You know what? Actually, you know what it was? It was shell shock. That's the answer. And in this case, for a few of these explanations for these military officials seeing UFOs, it was explained away as shell shock. Now, this reminds me of the LA UFO sighting during World War II when military officials were shooting, I mean, as many bullets as they could at a UFO at around 2 a.m., waking up the entire city of LA. And immediately it was brushed off as, oh, no, 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 it was just shell shock. They were just scared. They didn't know what they were doing. And sorry to wake up everybody and like ruin a handful of buildings with bullet holes in them. I said it was shell shock, but the pictures kind of said otherwise from what we saw in the newspapers during that time frame in and around World War II. This also with the Vietnam War, we're seeing that same pattern again. Luckily, we're not getting the explanation that it was Venus, but the biggest one was shell shock and exhaustion as well, because those that have ever been in war know how exhausting it can be. That is it for today. Be safe and remember, keep your eyes on the skies.